Freddie, for the invite. And oh, there we go, being recorded. Yeah, thanks for the invite and good to see you all virtually. Sorry I couldn't make it there in person this morning. But yeah, great to have the opportunity to talk about this topic. So yeah, I serve as the state climatologist for Colorado. I'm based at CSU in Fort Collins, and I'm on the faculty in the atmospheric science department. And I'll kind of acknowledge a few key folks here. So Becky Bollinger is the assistant state climatologist. She was kind of the lead author on the climate change report that we just issued that we just released that I'm gonna talk about mostly here. And Peter Goebel and Jeff Lucas are the other authors of that. I'll first give just a quick introduction to our office, the Colorado Climate Center, in case you're not familiar. So we've been the state climate office for Colorado since the mid 1970s, almost 50 years now, based in atmospheric science at CSU. And we talk about our mission as threefold. So we do climate monitoring, keeping track of what's happening with drought and snow and temperature and water and all those sorts of things. Archiving data, doing some analysis, collecting some of our own data that I'll mention near the end. Climate research, so applied climate topics that are relevant to Colorado. So again, drought, snowpack, water, high impact weather, things like that, things like the report that I'll talk about here today. And then climate services. So we're here as a resource. If there's data you're looking for, we can do our best to help, or kind of putting things in context, education outreach. We do lots of talks like this one and media interviews and things like that. So we're here to help if we can be of assistance. All right, so I always kind of like to start presentations like this with just a little bit of a reminder of what we're dealing with here in Colorado. This is a map. This isn't a climate map, but it's very important for our climate. This is the topography of our state. I made up this color scale that based on the colors in the state flag, which I think looks kind of neat. But you can, we know how diverse our state is, right? In terms of the topography, you're there in Golden, and you look out the window and you see the mountains. Obviously, we have the Eastern Plains, we have the various river valleys, and all the kind of individual mountain ranges as well. And all of those are important influencers of the weather and climate here. And so this is the topography, and then I'll switch it to the average annual precipitation on the similar color scale, right? And you see how closely linked those are, and how varied they are. So in Colorado, we go everything from the San Luis Valley, the high desert with 7 or 8 inches of precipitation per year, to just to the west, the San Juan Mountains that get over 50 inches of precipitation per year. In the form of hundreds of inches of snow. Here on the Front Range, we have sharp variations with the mountains, but also important variations with the more subtle terrain features like the Cheyenne Ridge to the north and the Palmer Divide to the south, which are a bit wetter. And then in the River Valley, Platte River Valley, a little bit drier on average. So you can kind of see all these different variations. And then this is one of my favorite ones, just because it's kind of it looks kind of cool, but also again kind of emphasizes the variations around the state. This is the map that shows the colors shading is which month is the wettest month on average, and all 12 months are represented in Colorado, and we're the only state that has that distinction in the U.S. So here on the Front Range, the northern Front Range May is our wettest month. Generally, you get into the foothills and mountains to our west, it's mostly April. The really high mountains tend to be in the winter. Southeastern Colorado in the summer monsoon season, the West Slope in either the fall or the spring, and kind of see all the different variations there. So again, a lot of different things that we're dealing with our climate. So that's kind of the 3-minute intro to what Colorado's climate, what we know about Colorado's climate. And we could spend a lot more time on that, but today we'll talk more on what kind of changes are happening. And so we just finished up and released this updated climate change in Colorado report. Came out just last week, actually. The link there is on the bottom, climatechange.colostate.edu. This is the report was last updated in 2014, so it had been a while. And so there's a web-based version. You can get a PDF. If you really want a hard copy, let us know. We're getting some printed up, but not all that many. And then on the website, there's additional graphs and maps and things like that were too much for the main report text. So feel free to check that out. But I'm going to kind of give the overview of this, at least as it relates to the Front Range here today. So the way this is organized, we kind of first start with those key climate variables of temperature and precipitation. And then analyze in terms of what the recent observed trend has been, and then what the projected future change will be, and then the confidence in that future change. So for temperature and precipitation, temperature is pretty straightforward. It's been getting warmer. It's extremely likely to continue getting warmer, and we'll dive into that here in a moment. Precipitation, the recent trend has been lower, but it's not certain whether that's going to continue out into the future. So that is still a pretty big uncertainty there. But the combination of warmer and uncertain precipitation has a lot of implications too that we'll get to in a minute. So here, this is statewide for Colorado, observed changes in temperature going back to the late 1800s. The blue bars here are years that are colder than the late 20th century average. The red bars are years that are warmer than the late 20th century average. You can see in the last few decades, there's a lot more red bars than blue bars. That's the warming trend statewide. The trend has accelerated a bit statewide since 1980 or so. Although that's actually not true for the Front Range. In the Front Range, the kind of recent trend and the long-term trend are pretty much right on top of each other. But in any case, you can see the warming there pretty clearly, such that the historically extreme warm years, like in the 1930s and the 1950s, those, what were really extreme back then are now more run-of-the-mill kind of years in the last couple of decades. And 7 of the 9 warmest years statewide have been since 2012. So 7 of the 9 warmest years in the last 12 years. Precipitation is more complicated. This is, again, statewide average precipitation. And the story there is much more the variability from year to year, from decade to decade, as opposed to any real trend. Certainly recently, we have had a downward trend from the 1980s and 90s, which were quite wet in Colorado, to the last couple decades, which have been quite dry. But it's not clear that that trend is going to continue downward. More likely that it's going to continue with this, all this variability. And this last year, water year 2023 statewide, was a relatively good one. Here on the Front Range, it was almost too much rain in some places. It was the wettest water year on record for quite a large area, from kind of Weld County down through Adams and Arapahoe into Elbert counties there, with that extremely wet spring and summer. So you can kind of see that, from the perspective of drought, it was a good one, but in some places it was more rain than was needed. Here are the observed temperature changes for 2 different time periods. So this is that whole record, 1895 to 2022. This is just the more recent period since 1980, divided up into these different regions around the state. You can see, warming everywhere, especially over the long term. Over the longer period, Western Colorado's warmed more than Eastern Colorado. And in the more recent period, since 1980, it's really southern, southwestern Colorado that have warmed the most. The Front Range, not quite as much. It's actually on this map, you can see the warming at the Front Range region. The northern Front Range has had the least warming in recent times. And part of that is due to the winters continuing to be quite cold, even though the summers are getting a lot warmer. And I think, that's what this next slide shows here. So there's a lot of colored squares on here, but just focus for this purpose, just focus on the top row here, which is the Northern Front Range region. And then these are all the different months. So January through December, and then the annual average here. And it shows what the warming or cooling trend has been since 1980 over our region here on the Northern Front Range. And what's sort of interesting, so the things that probably pop out are September and November being huge warming in the last few decades in those months. So the fall and also the summer have gotten a lot warmer. But you see February here actually has had a pretty sharp cooling trend over that period. We've had some extremely cold Februaries in recent years. And the springs haven't warmed very much either. So we're kind of in this situation, and right, we sort of, we can connect this to what's happened just in the last few months, right? Like we had a pretty warm summer, a very warm fall through December. Now it's extremely cold for the last week or so, and and we haven't seen a lot of warming in the springs, and so that's why the Front Range average temperature increase isn't as large, because we're sort of in this situation, and this I'm sure is quite relevant to thinking about trees and forests, right? Is that you have this juxtaposition of pretty sharp warming in the summer and fall. So the hottest temperatures of the year are getting even hotter, but the coldest temperatures of the year aren't changing all that much. That can be certainly a challenge to deal with. If we look out into the future for projections, we could spend hours on kind of the details and the assumptions going on here, but in the report we've mostly looked at this kind of moderate future emissions scenario, RCP 4.5 or SSP2 4.5 if you're kind of into the climate modeling literature. So what's shown here, the black lines here, is the observed temperature up to this point. The orange and brown lines are the climate model representations of that period. You can see they really aren't meant to get all the year-to-year variability, but they follow those observations quite well. And then the future projection is for more warming, under the assumption that future emissions are not going to be astronomically high, but certainly, the future emissions of greenhouse gases will continue. And so if we boil this down here, these are the two different kind of versions of the older version and the newer version of the climate models, but mostly just focus like around the median here. Shows a total warming by 2050 of about 4 degrees Fahrenheit, or maybe up to 5 degrees Fahrenheit. We've already warmed about 1.5 degrees for over this baseline period. So that's another, 2.5 to 4 degrees probably of warmth, 2.5, 3, 4 degrees of warming by 2050 for Colorado. Certainly some uncertainty bounds around that, but the warming certainly projected to continue. Now, again, precipitation, future trends, quite uncertain. This is kind of the current average. You have some climate models that predict wetter conditions in Colorado in mid-century, some that are drier, some in between. And so that is the part that's still kind of, I think, up in the air and is pretty hard to pin down, is that what the future precipitation is going to look like. But I think it's a very good bet that it's going to continue to be highly variable from year to year and decade to decade. So we can then kind of take this and think about what it means for water. And here's a few different aspects of water that we often are concerned about in Colorado. So snowpack in the spring, for example, it's trending lower, projected to probably continue to decline, but not with a ton of confidence there. Again, the year-to-year variability in snowpack is huge, so the trend is often smaller than the variability you can get naturally. But one thing that's more robust is a shift towards earlier runoff in the spring. because it gets warmer and it gets warmer earlier, the snow melts out earlier, and so the runoff happens earlier. Stream flow probably continue to decline, but again, more likely that it's going to shift than maybe that the total amount will decline by all that much. But these are two that are probably quite relevant for forestry here along the Front Range. Evaporative demand will go up because summers are getting hotter and will continue to get hotter. That's very high confidence. And soil moisture, as a result, will decline because of the increased temperatures in the summers. So one way we can kind of look at this over the long run, this is another graph kind of similar to the one I showed earlier, but this is, it's called Standardized Precipitation Index. And this is kind of over longer time periods. So it's basically showing long-term drought periods or longer-term wet periods. And so this is where those big droughts stand out, like the Dust Bowl of the 1930s or the 1950s drought, or the wet period of the 80s and 90s, and then the kind of three distinct drought, really dry periods here in the 21st century. But what I'm going to do now is, so this considers only precipitation. But what I'm going to do is add in go to what's called the Standardized Precipitation Evapotranspiration Index, which incorporates the influence of temperature, and the idea that the hotter it is, the thirstier the air is for water, which is going to pull that water out of the soils, the forests, the reservoirs, the croplands, et cetera. So kind of keep an eye mostly on the right-hand side here, because that's where the differences are the biggest. So here's precipitation only. And then here's with precipitation and temperature, right? So what's happening is basically when you have dry years, wet and dry periods are a natural part of the climate. But what happens is you take the dry years and kind of make them worse. And then when you get a period of plentiful rain, it doesn't go as far because the atmosphere takes it out of the surface more quickly. So it kind of changes the picture here from, dry, wet, dry to pretty much one prolonged dry period with a real brief, wet period. I think that's probably around the 2013 flood in there. So that's kind of what warming temperatures do to water. Is it just really puts more stress on the system. It makes the drought periods worse, and it makes the good times not as good. So, and then here's just an illustration of that shift in streamflow timing. Here, this is for the West Slope. So this would look a little different if we were looking at, say, the Platte River, but I think it's a reasonable illustration. This is for the Colorado River in Western Colorado. So historical streamflow is the black line here. So it tends to peak in June, and you still have the rivers flowing well into July. That's after the snow melts out and continues to run off, and then you get some addition from the summer rains. The future projections are these blue lines here, and the median is the thick one. So what you see here is actually big increases in stream flow in the spring, like in April and May, because the snow's melting out earlier, so the rivers come up earlier. So okay, so the total amount of stream flow here, like the area under this curve, maybe doesn't change all that much. But this shift is pretty meaningful because it's taking water that you would normally have available in the rivers in July and August when it's the hottest time of the year and you're really dealing with that high evaporative demand, and instead shifting it to April and May, which is probably not so much when you need the water if it comes to irrigation and so forth. So again, even if the total amount of stream flow maybe doesn't change that much, this shift has pretty important implications. All right, and then the last chapter of the report is kind of on hazards and extremes, and I'm not going to go through all of these today, but I'll focus on heat waves and cold waves here at the top, because Freddie kind of asked about that topic, and I think and we've touched on it a little bit already. Increases in heat waves and decreases in cold waves, but this is actually kind of a nuanced thing here. So this is future projections, and the kind of recent trends in heat waves have been upward as well. But this is future projections in heat waves. and for those different regions around the state. So the way to look at this is, so the way this is calculated is it's basically taking what would have been the hottest 4-day period on average per year in the late 20th century, so 10 of those per decade, and then seeing what that kind of heat will do in these future climate projections. And so what you see is those numbers go from the late 20th century, isn't shown here, but that would have been, 10 on average, goes up to like 100. So basically that's saying that per decade. So that's saying that, what would have been like the hottest 4-day period in the late 20th century, there will be 40 days a year like that by mid-century. So that's a huge increase in extreme heat. We've already seen this happening, like this has been there in observations in the the last 10, 20 years, just seeing this intense summer heat much more frequently. But on the flip side, so we do see projected declines in cold waves, but they're not actually very significant. So it might be, instead of a factor of 10, 8 or 10 increase like we see in heat waves, it might be just a factor of 2 decrease in cold waves. So like a cold snap that would happen once per year on average might only happen every other year in the future, which is not that big of a change, right? If you have to kind of plan for that. So in other words, a big increase in extreme heat, but extreme cold will still be a concern. This again aligns very, very well with just the last few months here, right? Like we got very hot again late in the summer, or some other summers recently have been very hot. I guess this one wasn't the hottest of them, but then we still get these really extreme cold snaps in the winter. And then we kind of see that this is just one other way of looking at that. This is for the Northern Front Range division, the highest average temperature of the year, so the highest average of the daily high and low goes up. The specific numbers here aren't that important, but you kind of see everything is pointing upward, hotter there, unsurprisingly. But if you look at the same thing for the coldest night of the year, it is an upward trend, sure, but you've got lots of things extending way down here close to where they were in the past. So I think a lot less certain what will happen with that extreme cold. So again, dealing with agriculture, dealing with trees, you can't just assume, well, everything's going to get warmer, so we just kind of shift to that. Unfortunately, we probably will deal with this situation where the hot extremes will get hotter, the cold extremes may not change all that much. So just to wrap up, observations in the last decade have kind of affirmed the long-term trends. So more warming everywhere in all seasons. Precipitation trends recently have been dry, but it's not clear whether that will continue. We're already seeing influences of warming on snowpack and soil moisture and stream flow, and kind of amplification of heat waves and drought and fires. I didn't even touch really on fires, but that's certainly another key aspect here. And then for the future projections, that's kind of where things are headed as well, right? Is more warming, so a total of 2.5 to 5.5 degrees by 2050, or another 1 to 4 degrees from now to 2050. Future precipitation change less certain. Certainly water availability issues are going to continue to be a big problem, and heat waves, droughts, wildfires continuing to worsen with additional warming. Probably increases in extreme precipitation and flooding as well, but that has not been that's certainly the case in the Gulf Coast or the Northeast, hasn't been as clear here in the arid West. And just kind of the last note is that these findings assume that a future emissions trajectory will be roughly in line with what the current policies show, what kind of current policies that are in place. But there's a lot of other trajectories that could happen. On the one hand, emissions could go up in the future if kind of the things turn in that direction, but also if policies continue to be put into place to reduce emissions, then they could go down further from what's shown here. So that's where I'll wrap up. There's our Climate Center website, my email. you can subscribe for updates. We're kind of put these webinars on pause for now, but if you sign up for our email list, then you'll get any key updates on that. So thanks for having me. Happy to take questions if there's some time.
Thanks, Russ. That was really great. Anybody got anything? Yeah.
Russ, you mentioned that the 7 of the 9 warmest years have taken place since 2012. When did record keeping start in Colorado?
Yeah, so we have the kind of very earliest consistent records go back to like the 1870s. But yeah, kind of getting into the late 1800s is when the consistent, real consistent record keeping to where you can actually make a graph like this looks like. Obviously, there's other ways of getting that information. So tree rings, other paleo records like that. Certainly, it's been warmer in Colorado in long history, way before people were here. It was more of a rainforest, tens of millions of years ago. But we didn't kind of design our way of life around that, because that was not the experience at that time. So so certainly over these really long periods, the climate's always changed. It's sort of the speed of the increase that's happened recently that is notable. But right, the records, it's just kind of a constant challenge in our business too. You can use Denver as an example, which is a constant frustration of moving the official weather station from the old airport to the new airport. Just sort of ruins the climate record for Denver, right? And so, but there are other places where we have better records, like here in Fort Collins and some other spots. So I don't know if that actually answered your question. I started rambling on a few things there, but.
Thank you.
Barry.
I have a strange question, Russ. How will solar maximum affect this, like, in terms of 11 years?
Well, sorry, can you say it again?
Maximum?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, sunspots and all of that, it certainly does have an influence on climate. Yeah, no, that's a good question about kind of the upcoming changes. I have to look that up again. I can't remember kind of what influences locally or regionally those changes tend to have from the past. So sorry, I don't have so there are influences on climate, certainly from changes in solar output, but they, at least kind of in recent times, they tend to be fairly small compared to, if you're looking over millions of years, those changes can be pretty big. If you're looking over decades, not that much generally. But yeah, I'll have to refresh myself on that.
Got a question in the chat here, Russ. See if I can paraphrase here. So at a very high level, we are looking at planting trees, probably best excuse, we're planting more heat tolerant and adapted trees for higher heat environment. While still taking, so this is kind of the question I'd ask you. This ties into the USDA plant hardiness maps that came out this year. We get a lot of questions, I'm sure we all are, about, hey, we're now in a warmer zone. But what does that really mean for us as far as, we got a lot of, people looking to the south to bring up plants that are heat tolerant, but what does that really mean as it ties into the USDA hardiness zones? Of, is it really gonna change us and what we're looking at?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, yeah, I think that suggested strategy, if you can do that and you have species that can handle all of that, that seems like a good way to go to be able to to assume that the hottest hots are going to be hotter in the future than they are now. But right, it's still, it's Colorado, we still get winter, we still can get these extreme cold outbreaks like we've had the last few years in the winter. So stuff that needs to be able to tolerate that at least periodic extreme cold, right? And so the hardiness map shifted a little bit, as you all know. The the frequency of occurrence of like -30 here on the Front Range probably has gone down over time. Like we haven't seen anything like that here in Fort Collins, for example, in town in a really long time. But there were some -30s on the Eastern Plains the last few days. Those will probably get somewhat less frequent, but that doesn't mean we're not going to get below 0 or below -10 on occasion. And so those kinds of temperatures you still have to be able to tolerate.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think that's a big concern just for us in general. And we're with a lot of different microclimates too. We're in these urban cities that have gotten bigger and gotten more mature, and so we have opportunity there. But there's always this thought back in mind of Fort Collins has seen -40, and what is that? It's probably a lot less likely, but is it a zero chance? Is not necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and the urban heat islands are a real thing too. And so on the one hand, urban forest canopies help to mitigate the heat island, which is a great reason to be planting trees. But that does kind of shift the actual temperatures that you get as well. So if you're thinking about in the midst of Denver or even Fort Collins, like you do get influences where I guess on the cold side that does tend to mitigate the most extreme cold. Like here, Fort Collins on campus the other night, it got to -17. But you go, 20 miles east to around Greeley, a little bit lower elevation, then you're in the -25, -30 range. So it does play a role there in both directions, I guess.
Anybody else have any questions here? Anything else in the chat? Russ, really appreciate you coming in today. This is great information. Really, really thank you a lot for being here, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks. And folks, feel free to get in touch if you've got further questions, or if we can try and point you towards towards data or other things.
Excellent. All right.
Thanks for having me.
We'll probably take a quick break while we get Ross set up here.
Thank you. If anybody's got any questions, ask me. And we're really trying to have those of you who are planning ahead about whom you're going to send to the tree pickup or the tree unloading. Please try to send people that know the size and names of trees, because it is a lot easier if everybody's speaking Latin that day, so that we can get the right trees for the right place. Okay, any questions, just ask me.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, you got any updates, CTC?
CTC.
Yeah.
Yes. We got all the grants in, we're reviewing them right now.
Can't hear him.
Yeah, we're doing really well.
David, you need to come up front and speak up here.
I'll tell him to be in a minute.
It'll be okay.
You have any, Neil? Oh, Neil's gonna talk.
I'm going to introduce Neil. Here's your president, Neil Bamesburg. He's walking kind of slow, so I'll do it again. Neil Bamesburg.
Well, when you break your big toe, you move a little slower. But good to see you guys all here. A couple things as far as CTC and camp tree program. I'm wrapping up all the new additions, corrections. So hopefully that'll be out in the next week or two, kind of depending on how fast Cami can get it up online. But we have 20 new additions. And so we're up in the neighborhood of 1,500-1,700 trees. It's, because we usually track the top 3, and sometimes that extends to 5 or 7 or 8, like for instance, in northern red oak. There's a lot of those big species out there. And so rather than just having the top 3, there could be 20 points between the 2nd place and the 5th place tree. So we include those all on there. So if one goes down, we don't have to go searching again, because they're just there. So I'll let you know about that. And if you have people that want to get the list, and that's not on the big email blast that I do, the city and state foresters, let me know, and I can shoot that out. The list that we give out to you all includes some of the names, addresses, phone numbers of the individual homeowners, and of course, we trust you with that. But online is just the general location. And so I do have people on occasion saying, hey, I'm coming to Colorado and I want to see blah, blah, blah. And so I'll give them the details on that. We've never had any issues or problems with that. So, so that's kind of what's happening in Champion Tree World. Regarding Vince Urbina, you probably got an email from me about his passing. And a number of people have responded to that and also asked about his memorial and what's happening there. I've been talking to Gail, his wife, and texting and so forth since. And they're having a celebration out there, I think it's February 24th. And so knowing that, most of you guys here work, as opposed to me being retired, your time is tied up. So they're having that out there, and I guess I kind of took it upon myself to try and organize a memorial service here in the Front Range. Probably looking at Saturday, March 23rd, I believe it is. And so putting together a team that could help organize that, and we're not sure where exactly, and all the details to that, but I'm figuring there could be maybe 100 people or better, as much as his influence, Carrie.
If you want to donate to CTC on behalf of Vince's memorial, maybe we can have that through the website, and then that can help with the funding for the trail too. Just an idea.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can certainly work that out to have a donation bar or something on the website to be able to let people do that. Kind of my thoughts on that was to get together a group of speakers. I mean, if there's 100 people and each person talks 5 minutes, we'll be there most of the day, and don't want that, obviously. So I was kind of thinking of getting a group of maybe 6, 8 people who would speak for 5 or 10 minutes, and some of the people that were close to Vince or that he had a big impact on, as he had with many of us. And then have a lunch afterwards and have some time to talk and get reacquainted and that kind of a thing. So that's kind of what's in the works regarding that. So any questions, comments, Gertie?
Is there any thought about doing a memorial tree for him up in Grand Junction?
I haven't talked to Rod Davis yet, but they're on the
Hey,
Yes.
Neil, this is Cammie.
yes, go ahead. Glad you're here.
So we're going to do something for him at our Arbor Day, April 27th. So we'll send out an invite if anyone wants to join us then. And we're definitely we already have some trees planted in Vince's honor, and we'll do more trees in Vince's honor for sure. And just as a side note, Gail is trying to make the February 24th memorial virtual option. And so if that is available, I'll also share that when it happens, if it happens.
Any other questions for Cammie? I think that's all I've got.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil.
You got it.
Oh, now I've collected my thoughts. So CTC has a new home. We've moved, and Carrie is our new executive director, and we are at the Spur campus, National Western Drive. I went up and saw her last week. It was really crowded. I don't know why. It was Free Day. You ever go to Free Day, the National Western? Okay. I wanted to tell you one other thing. So we have the Reforest Colorado as a fund that we have as part of CTC. It's basically to help communities that experience a natural disaster. We're in the process of helping the people that got burned down in the Marshall Fire, about 1,100 homes. We spent a little over $25,000. We're spreading it over 2 or 3 years as the homes are rebuilt. I think we're going to end up with at least 800 or 900 trees. So at least one tree for probably 80 or 90% of the people that got impacted. So you can also donate to Reforest Colorado. That is a fund we have also to do things like that. If anything ever happens, a natural disaster in your community, something that we can go in and really help you with the replanting. Usually when there's a natural disaster, there's all sorts of things that Marshall Fire is a great example. Those people lost everything they had. So actually giving them a tree or something that was really pretty fun. And thanks, Michaela. That was Michaela's idea originally. So anyway, that's where we are. And oh, the new office, we are at the Spur campus. So I'm hoping that we maybe end up having at least like a half a day a week or something where you have somebody there. Okay. Yeah, Neil? Oh no, we're tag team. This is kind of like the Smothers Brothers. Yeah. I'm Tom.
One other thing came to mind in light of some of the federal spending bills over the last year or two that have been passed. There's a big chunk of money, like millions, maybe billions, that's out there available to states and state foresters, and of course on down to us here. And so Matt met with Matt McCombs, our state forester, last year, and he's been rallying for Colorado, you might say, back in Washington, D.C. And so he was, I don't know how many millions of dollars he said that was coming Colorado's way. But so obviously with the CSU Spur, Carrie.
So the next meeting, Carrie's gonna talk about this.
Oh, well then maybe I shouldn't talk. No, that's good. Okay.
That's okay. Well, it's good to have a heads up. So, thank you.
Sure.
So the grants that Neil is talking about are the IRA grants. There were many communities, many of the other communities that actually applied for these grants also. The state received about 4.875 million from IRA, and we have a grant program. And so this will start in hopefully March. I don't know exact date yet, but we will have some grants available for communities to apply for. There are some caveats and stipulations to them based on the idea that we are going to be putting trees in places that have never gotten trees before. That would be low to moderate income areas, disproportionately impacted areas. So just keep that in mind. We are going to have a presentation by the next meeting to talk about it specifically, so we get into the details. But just so you know that this is going to happen. Also, a big part of this is capacity building. We want to make sure that even the smallest communities have the ability to have these projects and be successful in these projects over the next 5 years. The total amount that came to Colorado was 28. So, yeah. So a lot of money, and this, if you've been in urban forestry a while, like me and a few other people in here, I know what the Smothers Brothers are. Then you know this has never happened, and this is something that we have to take full advantage of while we have this opportunity. So with that being said, I will pass it back to Neil. So.
Okay. Yes, and as part of that, the 1991 Farm Bill that was way back then that set up councils throughout states to accept federal monies. We were getting around the neighborhood of $40,000 a year for administration and other events that we do in CTC, and that money dried up a number of years ago for a number of different reasons, but we got that back. And so we're now at 50,000 a year that we have at our disposal. So we're very excited about that, and hopefully expanding some of our programs, and again, being able to work with you all to well, get more trees in the ground and maintain the ones you have. So it's an exciting time. So
Very exciting.
Really thrilled about that. So thank you.
Terry, what do you have to say for us?
See my hat here. So, State Forestry, we heard what you guys said in this last REFA meeting, and we are providing some information. Everyone at the last meeting is like, we would love to have all the ordinances from all the tree cities available. And we had it up for a short time this last week, and so we're reformatting so that it downloads a little easier, but we should have that available in the next week or so. So if you are an actual community that is looking for upgrading your ordinances, you should have an ability for you to get on there and look at everybody's ordinances. We're gonna rank them as the ones we like. No, we're not. It's a contest, people. So that's happening. Also, how many people are familiar with Pester in this room? Probably everyone. Nice. Now we'll have an urban forestry serve. So all your urban forestry questions are volunteer. You can be trained your board members that have questions about urban forestry. We will have a listserv for them to be a part of, and we can answer each other's questions. So, okay, that's what I got. Thanks.
Very good. Any epic updates?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So Epic is planning a diagnostic workshop for Wednesday, August 21st, and it'll be at the Boulder County Fairgrounds in Longmont. And we're kind of following our Master Gardener team training format, and so we're just going to collect a bunch of crud that is, that's happening in the spring. And we'll just have stations and folks will go around and diagnose issues, we'll troubleshoot. And then because it's been so long since anyone has really done anything around Emerald Dashboard, we're going to focus in the afternoon on EAD, and I believe that LPCs we're still kind of firm up our agenda, but that'll be a full day workshop. So trying to figure out the price, it'll probably be around like $65. So we just want to kind of let everyone know that's happening. We have to limit the size because the space isn't that big, and the format with kind of groups of people moving around. We just want to make sure that we can kind of pay attention to everyone. So, but yeah, look out for that. We'll send something like a save the date or something once we have an agenda.
Where will we sign up for that? Will we be on like our local say chapter?
Yeah, so we usually distribute those through ALCC, ISA, all of the different organizations. Yeah. And then we'll probably have it on the CTC website as well.
We have an ISA update. So, yeah.
All right, can the camera hear me? Should I come on front?
Hi everyone, Tara. I'm on the ISA Rockland Chapter Board as the Communications Director and member at large. Program's coming up in a couple of weeks. Who's going to be there? Anybody? Come see us climbing on the trade show floor. Come get your CEUs that you need. That's January 30th through February 1st. And Patrick O'Mara has set up a great agenda for the climbing corner. You can probably get the majority of your CEUs for that for ISA. We have a track course coming up May 7th through 9th down in Colorado Springs. I believe there's still space for that. There's additionally a renewal with that. The Greeley Tree Care Workshop is coming up February 16th. All of these events are available on the ISA Rocky Mountain website to sign up and register for. TPAC, is anybody tree and plant appraisal qualified? Anybody interested in that? Cool. The ISA just put out an open comment session, so you can submit comments because we know that there's been a lot of revisions on the latest edition, the 10th edition. I think they're either on their second, third, maybe fourth rewrite. Go ahead and submit your comments if you have issues with that manual. That's on the big ISA website, so the national or the international website. And then we've got a couple of certification exams coming up February 1st. The deadline to sign up for that has probably passed, but that's at ProGreen. Check the website, see if you can still register for that if you're looking to do a written exam. And then the next one is February 16th up in Casper, Wyoming at the WGGA event. That's a great event if you don't want to come and see 2,000 of your fellow green industry folks at the Denver Convention Center. If you want only like 100 people in Casper, Wyoming at the Ramcota. Look it up, 4 hours to Casper. And then with that, something with a different organization, Society of American Foresters. They've just opened up application period to become a certified urban forester. So if you're interested in that credential, you can now apply to become a certified urban forester if you're interested in that credential.
Excellent, thank you.
Any questions?
Any takers on Casper?
WGTA is a really great little conference, and they have a whole like 2 days of prep before you take the exam, which is awesome. Question?
Any decision on where the climate competition might be this summer?
Okay, so there was talk that it was gonna be up in Montana. But then they were also talking about having it back down here, just because of logistics up in Montana. Maybe not having enough volunteers go up there, but there hasn't been a final decision made yet. So we'll probably talk about that at our next board meeting. Any other questions? I sent messages to Patrick and Kelly asking if they had any updates, and they haven't gotten back to me yet. So maybe if I get something before the end of the meeting, I'll let you know if there is an update.
Stand conference, really?
Loveland, yeah, okay, so if anybody is interested in the Society of American Foresters, the Colorado Wyoming State Society is hosting the national conference at the ranch in Loveland. And that is September 17th through 20th this year. Terry Baker is the CEO. He and Elizabeth Buell chose that location. It's gonna be split between the ranch and the Embassy Suites there, so a little bit of back and forth walking. But it should be a really great opportunity if you want to come check out Society of American Foresters.
Great.
Anything else? Cool, thank you.
And then on that same token, we had Patrick reach out about the TPAC qualification. So is anybody here interested in receiving that qualification? So a lot of times it's been hosted in Colorado. So maybe we'll explore that as a front range route and see if we can't get one hosted here locally. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, just with that, it sounds like they look to have a instructor to student ratio of like 20-1. So I'm assuming we want to have that.
Yeah.
I was just looking on the website for TPAC. They don't have it listed on their credentials page right now, so I don't know if they're revising it along with the revision of comment period on the workbook. So I don't know what the status is on TPAC right now.
Okay.
If they're trying to put it on hold until they do the revising.
That would make some sense. We'll reach out to them and say we're interested, and see if we can get on schedule when they re-up that.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So I think we have enough in this room at least. Yeah.
So I was at the ASCA Consulting Conference up in Seattle this year. They were saying that the refresher course for those that have TPAC will be coming out most likely virtually, and that they're going to start hosting classes. But you know, you're right, you have to have instructors and stuff like that. So for anyone who has it and it's expiring this year, there will be a refresher course coming out. And they're hoping, I'm probably going to get these dates wrong, but the open comment on the 10th edition is through January 2025. They hope to have the rough draft out 2027, and I think the final draft 2028 or 2029, something like that. That's kind of the time.
Slow.
Yeah.
So many comments.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like red GERS about the 10th edition, but I think that's why they reopened that.
Good. I think our last update, I'm going to update for Bill Kender for STEP. We have our STEP trees protection for called wholesale. It's going to be supplying some Choice City red chinkapin oaks. They're grafted red and fall color chinkapin oaks. We're going to have 20 or 15 of those available for 5 municipalities to participate in that program. A lot of thanks for Calls Wholesale for giving us those trees. They're going to be really, really fun for us. He's going to talk about it. And moving into that, here's Russ Schumacher from Climatologist. He's going to talk about some new trees. Okay.
Thank you. I want to see my next slide up here. It might seem, is everybody familiar with Plant Select? I talked last year But for those that don't, we're a collaboration with CSU and Denver Botanic Gardens, and we don't grow trees, we don't grow plants, we don't grow anything. We trial them, we look for new plants, we evaluate them and put them through systems to get the best plants. That's the goal for our region, for the most part. So buying trees into the future, and buying Alan Taylor trees for the future is a concept that has fallen in my lap, but it doesn't only apply to trees, it applies to native plants, it applies to grasses and all these other perennials. So there's two things that I really wanted to focus on today, and I'm going to mention it twice, but the one thing that I think I would like to see municipalities change, and you'll have to work with, of course, your city council, is one is making a purchase order and paying half down for trees 5 years out. That would really help this industry. It would help our cities. You'd actually be able to get what you want. 5 years is about how long it takes to get a tree to size, right? And it offers you the opportunity to pick the rootstock, to pick the top, maybe even pick what packaging comes in. Like, are you going to get a B&B, or are you going to get it in a bucket, plastic bucket or cloth bucket? At any rate, that's one thing I think that is important that I wanted to message today. And the other one was that open space for cities. We have a garden up and down the Front Range, and we're looking for good plants that we can use over and over again. The cities, most of them that I know, have a policy that you cannot harvest seed or any kind of cuttings from an open space area. Can people hear me?
They can hear you, they just can't see the presentation.
Oh, sorry.
No, we're okay.
So,
the mouse here.
where was I going with that? Oh, so the thing is that there's this huge native push, right? Everybody, I guess there was a survey put out, and everybody wants native trees. Well, Colorado only has a handful, right? Well, at any rate, there might be more plants that we could actually harvest that are really good for our area, that have the genetics per county. And the policy has to change. So you have to change that they can be permitted to be selected by certain people, and then those plants sold. So that is kind of the future that I see that I think needs to happen. And we're at a really great opportunity with Emerald Ash Borer, because we know we're going to be spending money on trees for a long time, but now, because we're replacing them. So we're trying to go into diversity. Does it work?
We see.
Yeah.
People online?
So
we good?
Cool. So I bring to you the whole reason that this all started for me was one, I'm in a pinch. I have to, since I don't grow trees, I have to coordinate our plant availability amongst 101 licensed propagators across the country. So trees are actually we only have a select handful of trees that we've been promoting, but I would like woodies, and I'm going to bring a lot more to the conference, but to the table. But it started with Alan Taylor's work. And this is the way things have been done in the past. It's the way Tim Buchanan's done it. It's the way Freddie was starting to go, I think. But, you partner up with a nursery, you send them product, and then that nursery trials it, and they say, well, we don't want it, maybe because they have a similar product. But at any rate, Alan Taylor had started that process with Heritage Seedling. And because of the relationship with Scott Skogbo at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, they started buying in some of these trees. Well, I found some money to get about 1,000 of these trees, and I've purchased them for 2 years now over from Heritage Seedling. They're very small, and I personally would like to give them away to municipalities, multi-site trials, things like that for people to watch. But I have a gap in my process. I have trees I could give you now. Would the city take those trees and pay half down for getting bigger ones 5 years out? That's the goal, is to get to that point. This next slide, I don't know if you can see it, maybe at home if you're on the office, you can actually scan this QR code, and it'll list all the Alan Taylor oaks that we have already gotten grafted, and are in the trials right now. At any rate, there's a lot of good information on them. We have the data concerning them all, how, their genetics. And I put this slide in because it's I was following Russ, and I actually wanted his comments on whether or not this was still accurate. So basically, the genetics from Alan Taylor hybrid oaks come from down south. So they're already adapted to heat. They're they don't get natural water. They came from natural precipitation areas. So I didn't mean not natural water. They didn't get supplemental water. But at any rate, these trees adapt for our region, and they're a lot smaller. And when I was listening to Russ speak, I think, you know, the water is really a huge component besides the heat. It's probably a larger component because the population's growing and our water is changing back, you know, melting off quicker and things like that. So at any rate, smaller trees might be a better investment these days, or, you know, 60 years out. This model here is up there is where those trees come from, but that's also a model from Maryland of what the climate's going to look like for Denver in 60 years is basically those points on there. So it's a good idea to pull plants from there and move them up, but that doesn't mean that you have to choose from there. I also think that we should be picking plants from Alaska, which you wouldn't think about, but I do think like the Alaskan cedar, Cupressus nucanensis, I think that is a lot hardier than we really think it is, and a lot more drought tolerant. It's not the hardiness, it's the drought tolerance and the heat. But I think that's one that I want to look at. We have somebody up there collecting seed going through Denver Botanic Gardens. You see how long this goes out. At any rate, you'll find that when you click on that QR code, it'll take you to these different documents, and these are the trees under evaluations. This is Dolores. This is a hybrid between Turbinella and Gamble, and it's got very blue leaves. And the blue leaves have actually stayed in different soils, at least at the tests at Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery. It's a shorter, more of a shrub. That's what it is. So maybe we'll start to have to reclassify or really educate the public about trees and shrubs. Like, yeah, it's an oak, but it only gets like 6 feet tall. So at any rate, we also have this one up here, the Quercus, King Canute. Oh, I wanted to go back here. I want to go back really quickly because of my twice ordering trees that get grafted, I'm learning which trees are the easiest to graft. So part of choosing the plants these days is not just what's awesome, cool plant. You got to mass produce them, or you got to be able to have some availability. So King Canute, for example, King Canute is very successful when they graft them on the roots. But there's another nursery down the road from Heritage Seedling named Coonsey, and they bud all theirs on, and they get about 2 success rates for every 10. So it may not be the best for that business model, but from Heritage Seedling, you could grow those up and put them into a pot and be off to the races. Oh, and if you have any questions, let me know. So this was one of the other ones, David, the Quercus harbardii King Canute, and it just has some of the best leaves. Freddie's planted a couple around Fort Collins. I'm not sure that Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery has some in pots, but I know they have some other ones. I just wanted to show you that these things are happening. This was last year's pictures at Coonsey, and they have 8-foot King Canute. So there's nurseries trying to get these things out, but if they don't have a market, then they kind of fail. What was I showing this one for? This one was not anything. My bad here. This was the climate change. You know what? I think we got the wrong program. Anyway, this was the actual map for the climate change up. And so, and then next to that is the Tollgate Canyon or Tollgate Quercus gambellii that turns red. Now this is supposed to get a little bit larger, 25 feet or so. I have not seen that in our trials, but it's one that we are trialing. And this brings me back to like more of the city trees. Okay, we have a garden up and down the Front Range. Tim Buchanan's been doing a lot of work. He's been doing work with Morton and things like that, and brought in this one. This is the Ulmus davanii, and we've named it kind of Choice City Select. And the reason we're doing things like this branding is so that we can actually capture funds for these trees through royalties, through our members, and then put some of that money back into the city forestry department. So if we start thinking about money coming in, you could make arrangements, or like for me, I tried to speak with Kendra about maybe just having a credit of trees with the nurseries. Buy whatever trees you want in the future. Maybe that's a way we could have a extra money go back into trees. But at any rate, this is one that I want people to look at in the future. And then we also have This is the one that Freddie was just talking about. This is the red fall chinkapin oak. How long's this tree been here? Because it seems, do you remember, Tim, this one on Magnolia?
Probably planted around the late 90s.
Late 90s, so what is it, 30 years and probably 30 feet tall, somewhere around in there. So at any rate, it reliably has red fall color every year. It seems to me like our falls may be getting a little bit longer. And if they're getting longer, I think we have more opportunity to see these things instead of them crashing and then just turning into brown leaves. There's another one that's we're trying out is it's an Acer Grandin Tatum crossed with a sugar maple, really. But it came out of the Manzano batch of seed that Fort Collins Wholesale was growing. Anyway, it has the most spectacular red, beautiful color you could ever see. There's another one that you can see on the slide that's just behind it, and that was also labeled as a Manzano maple, and it totally doesn't have the same features. Now, I was talking with Tim a little bit earlier, and he was mentioning that people should remember when they, well, I'll get to that story in a minute, actually. Here's another Tim Buchanan plant that he just sent to me the other day. This is in the park. It's a selection from an acorn that I believe you had at your house. He pulled it out. He's donated it around. He has a few more people, a few more plants to start the process of maybe building the herd or at least trialing them. The picture on the far left, on the far right, is actually Estelle. Estelle is one of Alan Taylor's Gamble red fall color oaks. And in my house and in Fort Collins Wholesale Nursery, I've seen that turn red reliably every year. It's a fantastic, I think, gamble, but it's not the only gamble out there. We have Tim Buchanan's, and I'm sure that you may even see some in your own community that you would want to try. And how do you get that to try? You get the scion. You can coordinate with me, or you can coordinate with Denver Botanic Gardens or Dan Burcham, and we'll get them out to the nurseries. So, and then keep track of them. Anyway, the thing is, now I just threw these kind of pictures up because this is another bur oak on the far left that's green. And that's one that Tim has pointed out, and he's kind of been screaming about for a while. And it takes sometimes a little bit of time to realize how good a tree is. But this one's fairly fastigiate and narrow. As Tim Buchanan would say, it fulfills a linden tree space. And linden trees may not be the best thing as it gets hotter and things like that. Japanese beetle. But that's another tree that's sort of on our list, and you can find that one in City Park. Then we also have John Pear maple. It's a Cato maple. That one I think is available, but why don't we use more of them? This is actually outside my office down in the trial gardens down there. That's the middle picture. And then on the far right, you have something like Fall Fiesta sugar maple. That is looking pretty good in the small selections that we have, but I think they have a ton of different maples we should try. And I'm not trying to push maples, and I'm not trying to push big trees, to be honest with you. But I think that we should know, and we should maybe try it out. Another tree that comes out of Heritage Seedling is Model Rocket. It's the Korean hornbeam, Carpinus koreana. And look at that. It's nice and narrow. It kind of almost fills that space of a little bit of that other previous oak, that bur oak, but it gets about 20 feet tall. But it's a zone 6 is what it says. Now, when I speak with Mark Krautman up there, who is really a tree expert, he says it'll grow fine in Denver. And I actually think it will in our urban environment. So we're trying those. Has anybody seen this or trying it? I'm just saying there's so many things out there that should be tried and then, you know, bought and tried and see where we end up. I wanted to throw this one out there. There's Dr. Klett bur oak or Buckeye coming out, Ohio Buckeye. I think we were going to try and call it Klettii. No, what was it? What was it? Not Dr. Klettii, or it was Jimmy K. That's what it was, Jimmy K. So I think that one's a good one, but these are real slow. We are harvesting off one tree, but I want you to start thinking years out, like, where is that tree? Don't try and buy it today. Try to buy it in 5-10 years. And Fort Collins Nursery right now is the only person that has it, but I have been taking some of these plants out to Oregon so that they can grow them up and hopefully get more availability quicker. This year, we're actually another Alan Taylor evergreen, Cupressus arizonica, or Hesperocypress now. This one is called, is going to be called, it's trademarked Crystal Frost. And it's a very hardy Arizona cypress. It's grown in Kelly Groman's yard for a long time. I actually saw it growing in Cheyenne this big, and they even transplanted it a couple times for about 5 years, but last year it took it out. The difference between this is very, very blue, but it also has sort of this fan kind of shaped growth that comes out. It's almost arborvitae-like, but then as the old growth comes, it gets a little more angular. But it's a gorgeous plant. It totally is drought tolerant, completely heat tolerant, should get about 25 feet. It might get wider in the landscapes than, you know, it might get half as wide as it does tall. So 30 feet maybe at the tops, but I bet you these things won't get more than 25 personally, especially if you don't water them. But another one that I'm excited about, and I think you should do some research on Xanthocereus, because I think this is a genus that's really going to start hitting the American market fairly quickly. Well, I say that in our world is like 10 years, but I'm trying to get this one out a little bit sooner. This is a pink flowering one. It's the yellowhorn is a very drought tolerant plant. It has a huge taproot. It's really hard to dig out and ball and burlap them. They don't like containers so much. So we got to figure out how to better grow this plant that makes it more successful in the landscapes, but it is very drought tolerant. And when you see the blooms, normally it's white, like on the right. It's an incredible plant. And then it gets these sort of orange shaped fruits that'll break into 3 parts and they have hard nuts inside. Anyway, fantastic plant. There's medicinal uses for it. I'm not sure. I think those are going to be coming out in the media fairly soon, but I don't know what they are. And I do know they're edible and they taste pretty good. If you had a lot, you could put them over a salad. Anyway, this is a smaller tree-ish, shrub-ish, probably 15, 18 feet tall. You don't have to, you know, the pruning on it is very minimal, if you ask me. It shapes very well by itself and just limit up as it grows. Another plant, I put this one in here, is not so much tree, but it's more of a shrub. This is a hybrid between Shrigley argentea and then Shrigley rotundifolia. And if you have time to go to the Four Corners just north of Sombrero, Utah, or Mexican Hat, Utah, you can find these the straight species of Shrigley rotundifolia, and they are glossy silver. They're so bright, and they grow on the cliffs, and they only get to about 10 feet tall, and they stay round like this. But our native one, the Shrigley argentea, it can sucker. It has a lot of spines. The bonus with this hybrid named Tori is actually that it doesn't get as spiny, and it doesn't sucker as much, and it's easier to propagate. The leaves look like argentea, but they're far more silvery, like the rotundifolia. Anyhow, there's one gentleman in just south of Logan that has about 300 or 400 of these things in pots right now. And this is going to be a completely xeric plant. I don't think no matter how hot it gets, it's going to be fine. And I actually think no matter how little water we end up in the future, I think this will be fine. Genetics are really good in it. I showed this one last year, and even the growers kind of miss things. This is Prunus virginiana. This was a selection Scott traced down up in Idaho in Sun Valley. He has 1 or 2 of them. He happened to graft this onto Sucker Punch. Sucker Punch is a great tree. Now, I'm going to go off Sucker Punch for a little bit here real quickly. Sucker Punch is, has anybody seen it sucker? Like suckering, really suckering, below the root crown. Anybody here? No. Okay, so to set this record sort of straight, I do believe that what happened was when this plant was starting to get pushed out from Fort Collins Wholesale as cuttings, they sent them to growers to trial, and those growers thought it was a clone, so they grafted onto a Canada Red. Well, then they sold those liners, and that got into the Oregon trade, where then they were in the fields and they're like, these things sucker everywhere. And so it kind of got a bad name up front, but please show me if these are suckering, because this is a far superior tree. It grows a little bit slower, or a lot slower actually than Canada Red by about a year. And that's why growers like growing it, because they can turn it around and it's still being specced and things like this. But I would highly recommend you put in a sucker punch. It's a great tree. But at any rate, as rootstock, Scott actually gave me this a grafted Sun Valley chokecherry, and it is spectacular. It has green leaves, not purple leaves. The flowers have not proven to be as big yet on this, but I don't water as much as I should. But the insects and things like that are a big beneficial, and I know everybody's facing that, but I found the caterpillars of, what is it, the swallowtails on here, and they roll up. It's perfect. But the flowers, this second middle picture is actually in his greenhouse. So with water, maybe fertilization, they get that big, but the one on the left is actually out in Idaho. So you go to the grocery store these days, right? Yeah. Are the shelves full like they used to be? No. What are we doing? You know, the aisles are getting wider because they carry less stock. And I think this is the way nurseries are going to end up going. So like second generation people that pick it up, they go, this isn't a moneymaker, off. This isn't a moneymaker, off. This isn't a moneymaker, off. So they only carry a certain selection. Our diversity is kind of going down in terms of those trees, even though we have a lot more trees and things to pull from that are new. But you're not going to find them on the shelves, right? And what you find on the shelves are going to be probably more expensive because of the convenience of just picking it up off the availability. But, you know, everybody's buying online. Everybody's doing these things. We can do this in our industry. There's technology there. And I'm working really, really hard investigating how to make that work. But if they can trace the genetics from coffee in Africa and make sure that it's the same bean that got to the coffee maker in the US, I know we can do this for trees. So this is Gila Monster. You're calling it sort of Gila Monster. It might change, but this is the Gamble oak down in New Mexico in the Gila National Forest. And there's been a gentleman down there collecting those seeds. There's been a lot of New Mexico folks that have been doing this a long time, but he has them on his property where they get watered every year. So they actually do produce acorns. So at any rate, you can see the one on the left, that's the one in his yard, but the one on the right, that gets 60 feet tall. It doesn't sucker. You can find it right off the road if you're driving down towards Silver City. But the thing is that when we found this, we decided that it would be good for rootstock for all these different Gamble oaks. Now, we got a bunch of seed. We took it up to Heritage Seedling. We took it out to J. Frank Schmidt, and I think there's some others. And this is their batch of seeds. This is like thousands and thousands. And unfortunately, they don't have a salesperson to actually pitch what they have available or not. They just send out the availability. So I'm at a point where Allen Taylor oaks get grafted onto these trees. They're proving to be really good grafts. And the other strategy behind this is for the company, the nursery down the road that actually buds them. When they don't have a successful take on a tree, they still have a tree that's being marketed from the rootstock, and that would be Gila Monster. So this is going to become a plant select plant. When, I don't know, 2025 would be super nice if people decided to put money towards it or remember to purchase it in another year or two. Hold on, I lost the thought, sorry. 3,000 of these. I have one grower already buying 600, and they're just going to sell them as they are. Now, here's why this is important. For this native movement, they can easily see clone tree, clone tree, clone tree. Who's going to take them to the idea that this tree is only your tree? This tree is special. There's no other one like it in the world. That people see trees and they see just all the same kind of plant. They might just be widgets, right? Well, this is that stepping stone, I think, because these genetically are not all completely true. They have to be culled out, but they can still be sold as Gamble Oaks, the ones that don't exhibit that immediate burrow characteristic. But at any rate, if anybody is looking for, let's say, Arbor Day trees, I can help you get them from here down to here. Now they're really, really tiny, but they're going to be a plant select plant, and you're getting fresh genetic material from down south that has experienced a lot of different climates. But so to the future of buying, again, native plant people, Boulder, Fort Collins, everybody wants genetics from their own county. How do we keep track of that? Blockchain. That's how you keep track of that. Now, the problem is that you can't have a nursery in Boulder selling only Boulder stuff because county, Larimer County doesn't want it. But if you can keep track of all these things, maybe all these companies can start to decide whether to grow them or not. And with trees for purchasing into the future, it's like a GoFundMe page. Go grow my plant. You put the money in, it all gets tracked from the source. You get it in 5 years, you have insurance cover it. And personally, if I were to design the whole thing myself, then I would think that it should run through all the local nurseries anyway. So when we think about getting food through Uber Eats or whatever, think about you place that order, there's the restaurant getting paid, there's a driver picking it up that's getting paid, and you're paying the money and Uber's getting it. This can be done. But we just have to think of it in trees and then work with the red tape in municipalities. Anyway, there you go. Thanks for listening to me sort of rant and be all over the place, but new trees coming out. So if you have any questions.
You got it. Any questions? Anybody got any questions? Question in the chat.
What is the name of the tree for the STEP program this year? And
I love it.
and when does the emails go out to request the tree for this spring?
If you send me or Kendra an email soon, now works. We'll get on this. We're looking for 5 municipalities. I think Mary's on there for next year already. It's a holdover from last year, but other than that, we're looking for four additional folks.
Hey, ready to, it's hard to hear.
Oh, well, I'll get closer. The name of the tree is Choice City Autumn Red Chinkapin. I don't know if you have a better name than that, Ross.
Choice City. Yeah, we know. There'll be one next.
But yeah, reach out to me. We're looking for four additional folks to join into that. Any other questions before we wrap up here? Yeah, Mary.
Would you mind walking through like what the easiest, simplest version of the other municipality is changing the kind of like voting ordinances right now? Like, what do we need to do on like the most bare bones to get things support this? We want their special variations. What do I need?
Well, the question is how to approach the city.
No, how to approach, like what do we need to do as a city to be able to get your, like, what's the best way to support the?
Oh, cool, thanks. For at least for trees, you can completely email me directly of things that you like or you've seen or if you've heard about, and then I can coordinate, or I'm trying to coordinate group orders. And what I'm trying to do is work with members, because it's too hard to do everybody all at once, right? So to work with members on the growing side and then the municipalities as well. But I think that this is good enough that all municipalities on the Front Range, and I think also we're different than out east in terms of how we get along. Like people get along here in the industry. And we work together. Anyway, how to do that? You can also work with Freddie to say, Freddie, Ross, I want to do this. What would I put him on the spot? Because it'll come down to me anyway, and then we'll coordinate like an order. Or I will also ask for availabilities. Now, I spoke with Heritage just last week about these trees, and there is time to start the grafting, but I don't think you want them small. So if you're looking at 5 years out, I might be able to find another nursery that will grow them to have them. That's how it goes right now.
Ross, you have a lot of partners here. Some of these trees we talked about, there is some in the pipeline. I think it's just getting local knowledge engaged too and asking for it. So like J. Frank Schmidt, I don't know what their timeline is, but supposedly they have like a Choice City Red Chinkapin, and then Bulletproof Baroque we've been talking about for a long time are in the field. And so they'll be ready as bare root for nurseries to learn. So they're not so many years out that we can't be asking for and requesting. And then and also I think building that network of growers with municipalities, I think there's a big overlap there. We don't have that communication. We were at Bailey's nursery, fantastic nursery. Met with their head propagator. I said, hey, what other municipal forests out there? He said, oh, nobody's ever come out here. He goes, we buy how many trees from Bailey's nurseries? And we're a big producer, a big propagator, and there's been no foresters go out to talk to them. So there's a disconnect there. So I think a big part of it is just that communication piece.
Anybody else?
All right.
Real quick, the gamble, part of the gamble of meeting, is there any stigma attached to that?
Personally,
Well, I mean.
like to the public?
for the-
Oh, I'm pushing it in their face.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. This is good.
Okay.
You know, I know it's like hackberry. They're great.
Okay.
You know, so I don't know. I kind of. Yeah.
It's gonna fight the fight.
At least that's what Plant Select stands is now. While I'm here.
Other questions? Oh, so we can through.
Oh.
All right, so if anybody else has any questions, otherwise we'll go to our last ISC update and we'll wrap up here.
I have one more.
Yeah.
This is Ray, but at the ISA conference in Albuquerque in August, I happened to go down this one block and it had these giant Osage orange. I've never seen them that big in my life, and I was just wondering, if our climate here is going to be similar to Albuquerque in 50 years. I didn't see any of that mentioned, and I have a couple of my neighbors that I've done through their music program, but I'm just curious.
So yes, there actually, I've been working with a guy in Iowa who's been doing a section of all the different selections he can find with Corolla Osage orange, try to find more full pretty much for us. I've got about 4 or 5 of them, of these different selections, and we'll try to get more cuttings out and out to local nurseries from those and work with them through Plant Select. This is the Breton Arboretum. If you're in Des Moines area, it's great. They're super friendly. It's out, and it's an old farmer that created an arboretum, and it's really, really cool. And the guy who's kind of their curator, Andy Schmitz, is a really great guy to talk to. He's a huge Osage orange fan. I think that's a treat for us for the future. It's just, if you look at the old ag books where they recommend that tree for windrows, they say won't grow north of the South Platte. Is like in the book, it says it won't grow north of the South Platte. Well, that's not that far out of here. You see them in Longmont growing. We've struggled with them for corn. We also haven't tried a lot of them because it's also an availability thing. Because there used to be 2 selections, which was Wichita and White Shield. Wichita, when it's young, is super thorny, so Jay Frank Schmidt stopped producing it. There's lots of interest. White Shield is starting to get some momentum again, but it has the same fair rooting issues as other deep rooted trees. But I'm with you. I think it's a great tree for us for the future. Yeah.
This would be a great transition. A lot of the range tree recognition and stuff.
This is great. Yeah, so plug the front range. So the front range tree list, Luke and I have been sitting on as well as some other foresters, Denver. Ben Rickenbacher's been there, and a few other folks. Front range tree list is wrapping up. At Pro Green, Jim Cletton, as well as Smoky Island. I don't know, Luke, are you going to be able to make it to that? TBD. Are going to be there presenting the new list. Please, if you have comments, we can even hold a session here during Fruff and talk about that list. And if anybody has any comments on the trees that are on there or any issues or formatting or whatever, readability, we try to increase readability. We added a bunch of new species. We changed the ratings on changed some of the rating system, try to make it a little bit more. And we have it now. Have a do not plant list, not recommended. So, yeah. All right, yeah.
Question in the chat, understanding future climate adaptation, but seems that our unique challenge is the extreme temp changes. Is that a consideration as part of the research for finding trees in other areas to import to Colorado? Do these areas experience the same extremes?
Yeah, I think this is kind of speaks. So when we talk about those Allen Taylor oaks, Allen was going to a lot of high altitude areas in the desert Southwest. Part of that is if we can kind of match our altitude with the hotter climate, we can kind of play the game of it's seen that cold, but it also can see the heat. Now, there's quite a bit of trial that goes on here too, because a lot of trees that wouldn't, if you look at the range map, wouldn't make sense to be a hardy tree or a hardy tree. Think about bald cypress as one of those. There's no way it's a hardy tree. Well, they seem to be at least some 5. So there is a certain amount of trial and error goes along. We can make our best guesses, but they're only guesses. Right. Yeah.
One shameless plug. I'm the site leader for Smoky Branches at Fort Logan in Denver.
The date for this year's event was just announced September 18th. If anyone wants to participate, we'll bring a calendar. Pretty cool event. I know everyone here has a unique set of skills. Later forestry, we'd love to have you guys all volunteer. Never been there, it's pretty fun. We buy breakfast, right lunch, it's really cool for everyone. Last year, we really largest in the entire nation. I'm hoping we can grow that again this year. Keep growing. Thanks.
All right, ISA update.
That's a bummer, because I'm gonna be at the ISA conference. The tree climbing championship is gonna be located in Longmont in July. So I hope all of you will be there to help either volunteer or participate. And Kelly's checking in with the TPAC, so we'll see what's going on with that.
Appreciate the follow up.
And if you're volunteering for the Pro Green Farmers Corner Patrick O'Mara, we'll be sending out an updated volunteer schedule and list and all that stuff in like the next couple of hours. So look for that around soon too.
Excellent. All right. Thanks everybody for coming. We'll see you in the next one. You're going around. Okay. You guys in Zoom can,